Did you know that on Halloween night in 1501, the Vatican held one of the most scandalous parties in its history? Around 50 guests, including clergy members, gathered for what became known as the orgy of the Chestnuts. This night was said to break every rule of decency, with no boundaries between the sacred and the profane. But what really happened that night? Was it merely a wild party, or something far more scandalous? Let's find out. Rome in 1501 was a bustling, slightly gritty Renaissance city with narrow cobbled streets, towering cathedrals, and the Vatican gleaming in the distance. The Catholic Church had a stranglehold on power, but let's just say it wasn't all piety and prayer. The city's official doctrine pushed for piety and adherence to Catholic values, yet daily life revealed a much looser moral code. Prostitution was widespread and openly tolerated in most of the city, with estimates suggesting that hundreds, if not thousands of brothels operated openly around Rome, catering to everyone, including visiting clergy members. The church turned a blind eye to these activities because these businesses brought in money, and any restrictions were often more for show than real moral enforcement. At the top of society sat Pope Alexander VI of the notorious Borgia family, along with his cardinals and priests, who held enormous power. During the 15th and 16th centuries, the House of Borgia was a prominent noble family from Aragon, Spain, and became involved in the political affairs of the church. It wasn't until 1492 that Rodrigo Lanzo Borgia became Pope Alexander VI. However, his reign, though only 11 years, was the most infamous of any Borgia. The city was practically ruled by a pope whose family loved power as much as luxury. He wasn't your typical holy leader, and the rules of celibacy, which is a vow of never marrying someone, didn't quite apply there. He was a father to at least 8 kids due to openly maintained relationships, especially with Vannozza de Catane and Giulia Farnese, 2 of his long-term lovers. Why wasn't he punished? Well, that's the core power of status. Family values were promoted publicly, but mostly treated as a secondary to political gain. Marriages were more about alliances than love, and keeping up appearances mattered more than actual family unity. The Pope's eldest son, Cesare Borgia, was as ruthless as he was charming. While most men in his age were praying or fighting in wars, Cesare was busy climbing the Vatican's power ladder, often leaving a trail of broken alliances behind him. He had a taste for extravagance and, well, let's just call it creative entertainment. So when Cesare threw a party, you knew it wouldn't be your average Renaissance feast with a bit of wine and song. This infamous event, later known as the Orgy of Chestnuts, was hosted by none other than Cesare Borgia, who had the privilege of being the Pope's son, so he was practically untouchable. The night of October 30th, 1501 in the Vatican wasn't just another evening of feasting. It was a gathering that would go down in history for all the wrong reasons. The venue was the Pope's official residence, the Apostolic Palace, which had more than 1,000 rooms. The guest list included his close circle, high-ranking church officials, nobility, and notable cardinals. While traditional wine and lavish foods flowed freely, the things that made this event so notorious involved adult female entertainers. So, what actually happened that night? And who was the one who lived to tell the tale? Before I tell you that and more, please take 2 seconds to help me out. Hit like and subscribe if you're enjoying the video so far. Thank you. Now back to the video. According to historians, the story of what supposedly took place at the Banquet of Chestnuts comes from Johann Burckhardt, a papal official and master of ceremonies to the Pope, who detailed the events in his diary, Liber Notarum, although not all historians believe it all to be true, but as it's the only piece of believable evidence from that night. It is considered both a rare historical source and a possible exaggeration. His unique position at the Vatican gave him access to the upper echelons of the papal court, making his observations invaluable. Burckhardt wrote that the food was grand that night, the wine was flowing, and as the night went on, things got more unconventional. When everybody at the banquet had filled their appetites, some 50 honest prostitutes, also called courtesans, entered the room. The women were all from Rome, as the papal court maintained connections with the local elite courtesans. They were dressed in elegant, likely revealing gowns suited to the bold fashion of the time, and it wasn't long before the atmosphere went extremely erotic. The courtesans began to strip down, dancing and engaging with the high-ranking clergymen and nobles in attendance. It wasn't long before boundaries were fully crossed, and the night's profane entertainment took a darker, more scandalous turn. The clothes were off, and modesty left the room for the night. After dinner, the candelabras with the burning candles were taken from the tables and placed on the floor. And now comes the chestnut part. According to Burchard's accounts, roasted chestnuts were scattered across the floor, and the courtesans, who now didn't have a piece of clothing on them, were reportedly made to crawl around and pick them up. As the story goes, guests watched on and even cheered during this bizarre display of a sexually charged floor show. All this while, the Pope and his sister Lucrezia watched it all from their seats. And soon, the room became an open display of sexual indulgence. The Pope even kept prizes like fine tunics, silk shoes, berets, etc. for those who could become sexually intimate the most number of times with the courtesans. There were special servants prepared for the occasion who kept score of the guests who ejaculated the most times. It is rumored that some attendees even ended up having children as a result of the wild festivities that night. Now, even if we disregard such awful details of the night, it is still believable by many modern historians because of the Pope's reputation and because of the fact that his surname Borgia was famous for everything scandalous, corrupt, and immoral. A Vatican researcher and Catholic priest, Peter de Roo, doesn't exactly agree with Burchard's story. He claims that although Borgia may have hosted a party, it wasn't exactly an orgy, and he claims that the Pope himself was definitely not in attendance. He believes it all to be made up to malign the name of the church and Borgia. The society in general had a mixed reaction to the night's happenings. Some segments of the public were shocked, especially given the church's position on morality and family values. They couldn't wrap their heads around how their religious leaders could indulge in such scandalous behavior while claiming to uphold virtue. However, the more powerful figures often turned a blind eye, continuing their relationships with courtesans and accepting the illegitimate offspring as part of life. The Banquet of Chestnuts really shook things up when it came to how people viewed the Catholic Church and the Borgia family, especially Pope Alexander VI. One thing was for sure, it was a prime example of hypocrisy and showed how the church wasn't exactly as moral as it claimed to be. This kind of behavior didn't just go unnoticed. It fueled a lot of skepticism about the church, especially at a time when people were starting to question authority and call for reforms. The more stories spread about the infamous night, the more it tainted the church's reputation, making it super tough for people to believe in the integrity of their leaders. Burchard's story is the primary surviving record of the notorious night, and his diary, Liber Notarum, is currently housed in the Vatican's secret archives. The extensive collection includes a wealth of documents from the papal court and is not fully accessible to the public. The orgy has been depicted in pop culture, like in multiple Emmy-nominated TV series, and reimagines the banquet as a way to trap untrustworthy cardinals rather than a night of revelry, and doesn't show any of the Borgia family present there. So you see, there is a lot of debate over who attended the Banquet of Chestnuts because records are sparse, inconsistent, and biased. Some say Burchard's description may have been exaggerated later as anti-Borgia propaganda, since official records were unlikely to document such events fully, and because the information was passed on by word of mouth, who was really present that indulgent night remains uncertain. Now tell me, what do you think of this notorious event in the comments section? Did anything like this really happen, or is it just an amplified version of a lavish dinner? If you want to see more weird history, then check out my channel and subscribe so you don't miss any new videos. Thank you for watching.